The whispering winds of non-duality. A long time ago, I read a book called Whispering Winds of Change by Stuart Wilde. And I don't remember a lot from the book at this point in time, but it talked about other dimensions, the etheric, your energy body, and it's one of those reads that really stretches your imagination and kind of makes you question how you perceive the world and your own reality. And I like those types of things to kind of loosen you up. And by the way, my name is Russ Rapp, and I make YouTube videos about non-duality. And if you're familiar with non-duality, I mean, it literally means not to, and sometimes that can be portrayed as, what you see, the manifest world is an illusion. And so when you talk about change, when things evolve, things adapt, things grow, a lot of times that's described as an illusion, and it's not real. And I think when it comes to non-duality, it's both real and unreal in a sense, because just in the act of communicating and the thought that something is an illusion, it really is it is emotion. And what we typically think of life, it's all about being animated, it's all about motion, change. And so everything that we see, everything that happens to us is change, is motion. Just in the act of talking to my my cell phone is motion. Me describing this is motion, because it's the sound waves going from my throat to the camera, and it gets processed through the computer, the internets, and reaches you on the other end. And you hear it as sound waves hitting your ear, and your brain interprets it. So all of this is a process. All of this is motion and change. And so when you talk about non-duality and you say all of that is illusion, it's really hard. Well, it's impossible essentially for your separate self, your ego, to really grasp what that means, because the existence of the separate self is in motion. And with this idea of life in motion, there is always change. There is always things that end. So everything that has a beginning has an end, Neo. Really means that anything that exists has the flip side of not existing. And so, even this setup that I have behind me with this bookshelf and these books and this dresser and candles and this picture are subject to change. They, at some point in the future, won't exist. And there's a lot of change happening in my life. And so part of this process is going to be taking all of this down. And so you won't see this setup again the way it exists now. And so when you think about that, it makes the idea of the infinite, the unchanging, seem irrelevant, because that's all we see in a dualistic perception of self and other. That's all we see through time. So how can you understand the infinite when all you see is the finite? And really, a lot of this idea of the whispering winds of change came about because I was riding in a convertible, and when you have the top down and you're going fast, you put your arms up, just like if you're going down a roller coaster, and you feel the wind just rushing by you. You feel the contact of the wind on your arms and on your face. And in that moment, it struck me like the idea that the wind is something that's happening to me. So the wind is hitting my arm and I'm experiencing the wind. But essentially, I'm the one in the car cruising through something that's, in that sense, static. So I'm the one in motion going through something that's not in motion. And so I feel the resistance of the wind. And the flip side to that is, I remember later on recently being outside on a chair and feeling the wind against my face. It was kind of a breezy day. And in that sense, it seemed like to me I was a stationary, static object, and the wind was hitting me. So it seemed like something was happening to me. And essentially, let me finish up putting these books down. Here you go. The Enneagram Personality Types. Don Riso, Russ Hudson, check that out. So even the camera that captures the perception of this moment can change the angle. Just flip it around, you can see the stack of clothes in the hamper over there. So wind. So what I'm getting at with the wind is, as a human being, we perceive things intellectually with our minds, and so everything seems to happen to us. And really, it's not necessarily one thing happening to us. It's really kind of that relationship between the two things that create that connection. So we typically only see one side of that relationship. And so it's never us going into the wind, it's always the wind happening to us. And when the wind is calm, like in this room, I do have a fan going, but I don't necessarily know it because the equilibrium is pretty steady. I don't, if I go like this, I can feel the resistance, but if I'm just sitting here, I don't notice the effect of the air on, oh great, it's raining again. Empiezo a llover. There. It started raining. Empiezo a llover. So I was gonna mow the yard. It wasn't supposed to start raining until later. So that's not gonna happen. So life happens as it does, and it's really coming down good now. That's exciting. Life happens as it does, and it's our reaction to it that we give meaning to. It's coming down good. So rain happens. So let's get back to the wind though. So there's wind, and really it's our experience of that wind that we seem to care about. We don't necessarily care about the other side of the relationship because we can't sense it, we don't identify with it. And really that's one of the ideas that the epiphanies that I had with this whole idea of wind and change is that we actually see ourselves, the reason why we believe we exist, not because we have a sense of self, is because we see ourselves as an object. And so the idea of I think, therefore I am, what is thinking is the object of the subject. And what I mean by that is, if you're just the subject and you don't see yourself as conscious or existing, into the sense that we as thinking humans do, that can abstractly see ourselves as separate from another, then you just see it from your own perspective, your own point of consciousness. And so the wind doesn't necessarily, as far as I know, have a sense that I'm wind. Because what is wind? Just a bunch of air molecules. So there's no concept that the wind has is that I'm affecting this object, which is Russ, by coming in contact, and there's that resistance. The wind is just there. And so as seeing ourselves as an object, then we can say there's this thing that's happening to a body, essentially. And so we don't identify as just the experience, the subject, a point of consciousness, and something happening, the wind blowing to that subject. It's really, there's an object there that we're identifying with. So our observer subject consciousness is identifying with an object. Otherwise, we're just here experiencing, and that's where people will talk about different types of consciousness and awakeness and awareness. And it's just like a cat, how much is a cat conscious compared to a human being? How much do they identify as a separate self? And if you don't identify with a separate self, then you're just existing and living and not so concerned about what happens to the object. You're not worried about your existential experience, or what is the meaning of life, or who am I, or do I really exist? All those deep questions that we ask ourselves as humans, we don't necessarily other forms of consciousness or energy, because all of the awareness is everywhere. And so the wind, the air molecules are aware of the conscious contact with me, Russ Rapp. But me as a thinking human are the only one that abstractly considers it or sees it as something happening to something else. Whereas the wind is just something happening. I'm going to put you down. So that's the crux of it. We see ourselves as an object that exists in time, that goes through change. And anytime there's something that seemingly exists, then it can seemingly not exist. So as humans, obviously we can die, or, it's really a definition of who we are as people. And so typically we see ourselves in the superficial sense, the top layer of the neocortex, human thinking, the personality, the ego, the structure. We don't see ourselves as the cells and the organs and that sort of thing. And to really illustrate this even better, if you've had that experience, which I think most people have, where you're sleeping on your arm wrong, and all of a sudden, you wake up and your arm has fallen asleep. And typically when, I touch my arm right there, I sense it from both sides as the toucher and the thing that receives the touch. So I can sense that because I have nerve endings on both sides. But when your arm falls asleep, you touch your arm, you only get the sense, since your nerves are cut off from your sensory system, then you're only getting the feel from the one that's doing the touching. You're not getting the sense from the other side. So in a sense, your arm feels like an alien arm, or it's not really part of what you identify. And so that's essentially through, I know Paul Hederman talks about conscious contact. Essentially that's what that is. It's always a relationship between the things that are coming in contact, but we only sense it from the one side of that relationship, and that's the only side that we give meaning to and say that matters. But consciousness awareness is in everything, in all things. So it's not something unique to being human, but our point of consciousness believes that our experience of that side of the contact is the only thing that matters. But obviously there's other things that matter in life. So I hope that kind of makes sense. And I think I'm going to finish taking stuff off the bookshelf real quick, just so you can get the full effect of things changing, things coming to an end, things never being the same way twice. Because even in every moment goes away, fades away, and is no more. Whoop. Her flower fell. Her bouquet. Put that back on her hand. As the cat knocks over my chair. Her name is Princess, by the way. Okay. Last but certainly not least, oh, you can see the ring light. Here you go. It's empty. So things are constantly changing. We try to hold on to the air. We try to hold on to the moment and try to make something that's infinite, finite. We try to make something that can't be contained. And so we create this reality of solid structures, and we do that we try to create things that are solid, and we call that life. But the infinite and the finite is the same thing. The animation and the unchanging is the same thing. I like your comments, so leave your comment below. Princess and I wish you peace.